Every chair turned slightly, every whisper dulled, every assumption grew louder than truth. What does it take for someone to be seen in a world that looks right through them? Let us know in the comments section below. The sack hit the marble floor with a quiet thud, softer than the laughter behind the glass walls. Celine Henriksen stood still, her gloved fingers resting gently on the leather strap over her shoulder. Her presence didn't shake the room. No, it barely stirred it. The bank's interior buzzed with polished shoes and phone calls, espresso-colored desks shining under the pendant lights. In a corner, a young teller leaned toward a co-worker, grinning over something on her screen. They didn't look up. Celine stepped forward. Her coat, faded but clean, brushed the backs of her calves. It moved like someone who'd never rushed a day in her life, or maybe someone who'd once rushed every day until she learned better. The line at the counter thinned, one man stepping away with a nod of thanks, another woman too absorbed in her phone to notice Celine shuffle in behind her. There was no welcome, no eye contact, just the crisp chirp of a printer and the soft hum of bias. Behind the counter, the bank manager Marcus Rollins, 34, Harvard-educated and far too confident, glanced up, then looked away just as fast. Nothing about the woman caught his interest. She wasn't dressed in power. She wasn't holding a briefcase or a clipboard or even a phone. He chalked her up as one of those people probably needed to cash a government check or open an account with nothing in it. He didn't know her name. He wouldn't bother to ask. Celine waited, quietly. Her hands, wrinkled but firm, clutched the strap of the old canvas bag as if it carried something more than belongings. A man in a tailored gray suit stepped in behind her and was instantly greeted with a smile from a nearby teller. He waved past Celine and was pulled forward with a "Right this way, sir." She was skipped like a scratch on a record. Celine didn't flinch. A younger man, balding, a little too eager, stepped up to the front desk. He glanced at her, frowned, and said loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, "Ma'am, do you need assistance finding the community branch? It's usually easier to navigate over there." He smiled like he was doing her a favor, like he had a clue. Celine's eyes, cloudy gray, sharp as cracked glass, lifted. "No," she said, calm and measured. "I'm right where I need to be." He hesitated, then stepped back, muttering something under his breath. Celine waited again. The woman behind the counter finally called her forward. The nameplate read Jamie T., and she wore her professionalism like an accessory, shiny but disposable. "How can I help you today, ma'am?" she said, dragging out the last word with a smile that didn't meet her eyes. Celine gently placed the canvas sack on the counter. "I'm here to check on my account." Jamie nodded mechanically. "Of course. I'll just need your account number and a valid form of ID." Celine said nothing. She slowly unzipped the bag. Out came a folded envelope. Thick, yellowed. She slid it across the counter with the same reverence someone might use to hand over a child's birth certificate or a folded flag. Jamie took it, sighed softly, and opened it. Then froze. Her eyes danced across the page once, then again. Her posture shifted. Hold on just a moment, please." She stood up and disappeared into the manager's office. Marcus looked up as she entered. "Problem?" Jamie's voice was hushed. "You might want to take a look at this." Marcus read it, expression casual at first, then stiffening. His brows drew close. "Where's the woman now?" "She's at my window." He glanced over Jamie's shoulder and saw Celine standing there, just as still, just as quiet. Marcus closed the door behind him when he stepped out. "Miss Henriksen, is it?" His voice had changed, sharper now, respectful but unsure. "Would you mind joining me in my office?" Celine picked up her bag and followed. Inside, the atmosphere was different, more cautious. Marcus gestured for her to sit, and she did. "I just want to clarify," he began, his hands folded tightly on the desk. "This document says you are the majority shareholder of..." "This bank," Celine said. Her voice was like sandpaper and velvet all at once. It didn't ask for validation. Marcus's throat tightened. "May I ask?" "How?" Celine reached back into her sack. She pulled out a notebook, weathered leather, pages stuffed with documents and records. She opened it to a tab. One by one she placed them in front of him. Property deeds, legacy contracts, board certificates. Her name was stamped on them all, with dates that stretched back decades. Marcus scanned them like he'd never seen paper before. "I invested in this bank in 1968, Celine said. "My husband and I started with small savings. By the time he passed, we'd grown our holdings. I've kept them ever since." Marcus blinked. "But why," he began, then trailed off. "Why didn't I say so when I walked in?" He nodded. Celine smiled, slow and knowing. "Because sometimes it's important to see how people act when they think you're invisible." Marcus leaned back in his chair, suddenly aware of the weight in the room, of the silence outside his office, of the woman in front of him who carried generations in her voice and legacy in her hands. Celine didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her presence filled the space in a way no one there had expected. She stood up. "I'd like to speak to the regional director." Marcus's mouth opened, then shut. He nodded. "Yes, of course, right away." As she walked out, the staff looked up. They saw her now, but it was too late to pretend they always had. It wasn't the first time Celine Henriksen had been underestimated. Not by a long shot. The door clicked shut behind her as she stepped out of Marcus Rollins' office, her cane tapping softly against the polished tile. This time people noticed the sound. Not because it was loud, but because now it meant something. The staff, who had dismissed her before, now watched her like she'd materialized out of a history book they never cared to read. But Celine didn't pause for anyone. She walked past the counters, the gleaming ATM screens, the faux plants, and the security guard who had pretended not to see her when she walked in. He adjusted his tie now, standing straighter, as if to show he'd been alert the whole time. She didn't so much as glance at him. Outside, the air smelled of exhaust and concrete and fading spring blossoms. Downtown pulsed around her, people moving, horns honking, the weight of a city that forgot its past even as it stood on its shoulders. Celine moved at her own rhythm, slow but deliberate. Each step carried decades. Her driver, young, wide-eyed, opened the door to the black town car with shaking hands. "I didn't know, ma'am," he stammered. I didn't realize." "You're fine, son," she said, folding herself carefully into the seat. "You were respectful. That's more than most." He nodded quickly, closed the door, and climbed into the front seat. As the car pulled away from the curb, Celine let her eyes drift toward the window. She wasn't looking at the buildings or the people. She was looking through them, into a memory. This city hadn't always looked like this. Before the steel and glass towers, before the artisan cafes and co-working hubs, there were neighborhoods, real ones, rows of shotgun houses, corner stores that cashed paychecks, and porches where old men played chess and old women told the truth. She and her husband Walter had lived in one of those houses. 2 bedrooms, a tiny front lawn, a tree that bent sideways from the wind but never broke. Walter had been the first to believe they could build something bigger. "Celine," he'd told her once, cigarette perched between his lips, "this city's gonna grow, but it won't grow with us in mind. So we've got to buy a piece of it before they tell us we can't." He'd taken every extra dollar from his job at the docks and put it toward shares, small ones at first, ridiculously small, but over time it added up. Celine hadn't understood it all back then, not the numbers, not the strategy, but she trusted Walter, and she watched, and she learned. By the time he passed, she understood more than the men in suits did. She took over everything, not because she wanted to, Because there was no one else who could. Celine's mind returned to the present as the car stopped in front of a modest brick building. Not a skyscraper, not some bank headquarters, just an old stone structure on the edge of downtown, tucked behind a row of gentrified townhouses. The sign on the gate read, Henriksen Community Foundation. She stepped out, cane in one hand, bag in the other. The staff inside greeted her like a matriarch. Because that's what she was. Miss Henriksen, the receptionist beamed, the conference room is ready. Good, Celine said, nodding. Tell the board I'll be in shortly. She took her time walking down the hallway. The walls were lined with black and white photos. Children holding up trophies, single mothers receiving keys to new apartments, young black entrepreneurs cutting ribbons outside storefronts. The faces changed over the years, but the mission never did. Build what they won't let you enter. She entered the conference room and took her seat at the head of the table. One by one the board members filed in. A young man in his 20s, a woman with a toddler on her hip, an older man with trembling hands and sharp eyes. This wasn't a corporate board. This was community. Real people, real grit. All right, she said. Let's begin. They discussed grants, housing, job placement, scholarships. Celine listened more than she spoke, but when she did speak, everyone listened. Because she never wasted a word. Near the end of the meeting, her assistant leaned in and whispered, There's a call from the regional bank office. They're requesting a meeting. Celine didn't even blink. Set it, she said. They're late. After the meeting, she returned to her office, a small, sunlit room that smelled of paper and polish. On the desk sat a photo of Walter, his smile wide, his arm around her, his eyes squinting from the sun. Celine touched the frame. They saw me today, baby, she murmured. But they didn't see you. Didn't see all the Saturdays you skipped sleep to work overtime. Didn't see how you kept the books even when your hands were too sore to hold a pencil. She paused. But she sat down at the desk and opened her notebook, the same one she'd shown Marcus. She turned to the back pages, pages filled with handwritten notes, timelines, and goals. At the very top was a name written in bold ink, the Legacy Project. It wasn't about owning a bank. It never was. It was about leaving something behind that couldn't be erased, something the city couldn't gentrify out of memory. Celine picked up her pen and added a new note under the Legacy Project header. Phase 3, full ownership. Transfer to foundation. Confirm legal counsel. She capped the pen and leaned back. They had treated her like she didn't belong. That was their first mistake. Thinking she came in today to prove herself. That was their second. She didn't need validation. She had receipts. Let them scramble now. Let them run the audits, call the lawyers, check the signatures. Everything was in order. She'd made sure of it. And when the time came, the very bank that had once dismissed her would answer to a boardroom filled with faces like hers. The city had forgotten where it came from. She was here to remind it. And she wasn't done yet. Celine's name was now in rooms it hadn't been spoken in for decades. Not as a footnote, not as a donation slip, but as a reckoning. 2 days after her visit to the bank, her name hit the executive floor like a cold wind through a glass tower. The regional board called an emergency session. Legal scrambled to review old files. One junior analyst even asked aloud if she was still alive. She was, and far more than that. She was moving. Inside the Henriksen Foundation, Celine sat across from a woman in a navy blue power suit, braided hair pinned high, a silver pin shaped like Africa on her lapel. So what you're telling me, the woman said, tapping her tablet, is that you own 52% of CMB Bank's original parent entity, and that you intend to invoke the dormant clause. Celine nodded. That's right. The woman exhaled slowly, impressed. Miss Henriksen, I've been in corporate law 15 years. I've never seen anyone hold this kind of leverage and just sit on it. Celine tilted her head. Child, that's because most folks don't understand the power of patience. The attorney smiled wide. Then let's put this patience to work. That afternoon, the legal notice was sent. It wasn't loud, no press release, no press at all. Just a clean, sharp document that made it very clear. Celine Henriksen, by right of equity ownership and preserved shareholder clauses, now demands a formal meeting with the Regional Executive Board under Provision 17A and intends to vote her interests accordingly. It was the kind of letter that made careers end. At the downtown branch, Marcus Rollins didn't get the letter. He got the phone call. His supervisor didn't yell. He didn't need to. She's the majority stakeholder, the voice said flatly, and she walked into your branch with a canvas sack. I didn't, Marcus started. No, the voice interrupted. You didn't. Ugh. The call ended with silence that lasted longer than his career likely would. By sunset, Marcus was in his office shredding papers with trembling fingers, trying to look composed for the security camera while sweat soaked through his undershirt. Meanwhile, the staff whispered louder than usual, side eyes slicing through the air like razors. Nobody was laughing anymore. Back at the foundation, Celine was standing with the youth board, 6 teenagers and 2 college students in hoodies, sneakers, and unapologetic ambition. She had gathered them in the common room and set out a large whiteboard with a single phrase written in black marker: "We don't ask to belong." The young people sat in a semicircle, watching her. "I need you to understand something," she said. "The system that runs this city, it wasn't designed for you. You are not its client. You are not its concern. You're its product. But that only matters if you let it stay that way." One of the girls, Trinity, age 16, future fire starter, raised her hand. "But how do we change it if we don't even get in the room?" Celine stepped forward and underlined the phrase on the board. "You don't ask to be in the room, baby. You build the room. And you buy the land it sits on. Then let them knock." The teens sat with that, not just the words, but the truth of them. You could hear the gears turning behind their eyes. She handed each of them a folder. Inside, bank statements, grant documents, and the bylaws for the foundation. "You're not just here to run youth events," she said. "You're here to learn, to plan, to carry this forward when I'm gone." They grew quiet. "I'm not dying," she added quickly, smirking. "But y'all move faster than I do now, so we start today." That night, back in her home, modest but filled with hardwood and humming with history, Celine sat at her old roll-top desk and wrote in her notebook. The radio played soft soul music in the corner, and a kettle hissed on the stove. "Legacy doesn't start with headlines," she scribbled. "It starts when someone says your name and someone else knows why it matters." She paused, then added, "I've spent a lifetime making sure they couldn't erase Walter, couldn't erase our neighborhood, couldn't erase me." A knock at the door pulled her from the page. Her assistant, Justine, poked her head in. "Sorry to disturb, the bank just called. They've confirmed the executive board meeting. You'll have full voting rights. They want to meet in person." Celine leaned back in her chair. "Of course they do." She didn't gloat. There was no joy in watching people sweat. But there was satisfaction in being seen, finally, fully. The day of the meeting, the building felt different. Maybe it was the silence when she entered, or the way even the air felt like it was holding its breath. This time, no one offered to send her to a community branch. This time, the guard opened the door himself and said, "Miss Henriksen, it's an honor." She gave a polite nod. "Thank you, son." The elevator ride to the 18th floor was slow, deliberate. She could see her reflection in the doors, coated in grace, wrapped in time. Her brooch was the same one she wore at Walter's funeral. She wore it now, like a badge. When the doors opened, the conference room was ready. 12 men and women sat around a sleek black table. Expensive suits, silver pens, water poured into glasses that cost more than some people's groceries. They stood when she entered. Celine walked to the head of the table, took her seat, and folded her hands. "Let's begin," she said. They talked about structure, about shareholder rights, about governance. But Celine didn't hear most of it. She had read all the contracts. She had memorized the language. What mattered now wasn't law. It was truth. "I'm not here to destroy anything," she said, finally cutting through the room like a blade through velvet. "I'm here because I believe the people who built this place should still have a stake in it. And I don't mean on paper. I mean in practice." A pause. "If this institution wants to claim integrity, it better start acting like it has some." The room was silent. Then, slowly, heads nodded. Not all of them, but enough. Celine opened her bag and placed a folded document on the table. Henriksen Foundation Proposal for Joint Community Banking Partnership. She looked each executive in the eye. "You can either work with me," she said softly, "or answer to a very public inquiry about how you treated the majority owner when she walked in your front door." The air went still again. But this time, she wasn't invisible. She was undeniable. The sun rose slower than usual on the morning the sign changed. It wasn't the kind of morning that asked for attention. No banners, no ribbon-cutting ceremony. Just one quiet truck pulling up to the building, one worker with a ladder, and a single piece of metal wrapped in brown paper and tape that held the future in embossed letters. Celine didn't arrive in a town car this time. She had her cane, a light gray coat that once belonged to her mother, and a small thermos of coffee in her hand, still steaming when she stepped out of the passenger seat of Justine's Toyota. The old bank sign came down with a heavy clank that echoed across the concrete sidewalk. The worker paused and glanced down at Celine. She gave a small nod. He understood. He unwrapped the new plaque carefully, like it was sacred. Henriksen Bank and Community Trust. The words gleamed against the glass, freshly bolted above the door. Celine looked up at it for a long time. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Inside the bank, everything felt different. The counters had stayed the same. The floor still carried the same marbled polish. But there were new faces behind the glass. A young black woman named Nia sat at the teller window, wearing her grandmother's earrings and a smile too proud to be anything but earned. A Latino father of 3, named Armando, greeted guests at the door and offered water to anyone who looked like they were waiting too long. Behind the desk that once belonged to Marcus Rollins, who had resigned quietly just a week earlier, now sat a woman in her 50s named Celeste Johnson, who used to run financial literacy classes out of a community center basement. Celine had offered her the job directly, no interview, just faith. And maybe that's what was in the air now. Not just justice, not just recognition. Faith. She made her way slowly through the lobby, nodding to each employee, taking her time, not because her legs were tired, but because she wanted to savor it. The branch had been repainted with warmer tones. On the far wall, a mural was being installed, mid-brush stroke. It was a depiction of the neighborhood as it once was. Corner stores, barber shops, brownstones, children running with popsicles in hand. In the corner of the mural, almost hidden in the shadows of an old stoop, was a couple holding hands. Walter and Celine. Celine didn't ask the artist to include them. He did it on his own. In the center of the lobby, a long table had been set up with coffee, pastries, and a stack of flyers. The top flyer read, "Grand Reopening Celebration. Community first, always." As customers trickled in, their reactions were visible. Raised brows, smiles. One older man even took off his hat, whispering, "Well, I'll be damned," when he saw the new signage. Celine watched it all from a chair tucked to the side. She wasn't there to be the center. She'd already built the circle. Justine sat beside her, tablet in hand. "Press is outside," she said. "City Council wants to take a picture with you in front of the new sign." Celine chuckled softly. They weren't interested last year. Guess the news is more interesting when it's trending. Celine sipped her coffee. Let them wait a few minutes. A child ran by with a sugar cookie, nearly knocking over a vase of donated flowers. His mother chased after him with an apologetic smile. Celine smiled back and gave a playful wave. Then the glass doors opened again, and in stepped someone Celine hadn't seen in more than 30 years. Tall, upright posture, still wearing cufflinks, though his hair was now entirely white. Edward Mathis, former CEO of the bank back in its heyday, retired, revered by some, feared by many. Celine's face didn't flinch. Edward approached slowly, cane in hand, just like her. "I read the article," he said gently. "Didn't know you were still in town." "I never left," she replied. He looked up at the sign. "Didn't expect to see your name there." She smiled. "Didn't expect you to come see it." He nodded slowly, then exhaled. "It's good. The name. You earned it." "No," she said. "We earned it. The neighborhood, Walter. Every person that was told no here." Edward looked down. "I suppose I owe you an apology." Celine tilted her head. "Suppose you do." He chuckled. "You're not going to make it easy, are you?" "I'm 78 years old, Edward. I haven't made anything easy since 1961. He reached out a hand. "For what it's worth, I'm glad it's you. Someone who remembers what this city used to be." Celine shook his hand, firm and short. "Now we build something better." By midday, the press had gathered. Cameras rolled. Photographers lined up along the sidewalk. The councilwoman stood front and center, smiling wide. But the photo that made the front page the next day wasn't her. It was Celine, standing with her cane, one hand resting gently on a young boy's shoulder, both of them looking up at the new sign. Henriksen Bank and Community Trust. The headline didn't shout. It whispered, "She never left." That evening, after the crowd had thinned and the sun had begun to dip behind the skyline, Celine returned to the mural. The artist was still painting, his brush careful around the faces. "You captured him perfectly," she said. The artist smiled. "I did my best." She stepped closer, running her hand lightly along the dried portion of the wall. "Walter used to say we couldn't wait for the world to make room," she said. "Said we had to carve it ourselves, inch by inch." The artist nodded. "You carved it, Miss Henriksen." She smiled softly, eyes glistening. "No," she whispered. "We're still carving." The city hadn't changed overnight. But on that corner, on that block, in that building that once erased her presence with a glance, the future had found a new foundation. And it was spelled out in steel. For every woman passed over. For every name forgotten. For every door that was locked too long. Celine opened hers wide and waited for the world to catch up.